Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, cause Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix in women's MMA. We've got you covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel, and I hope you're doing well for yourself. You, your family, your friends, whether you live in the States or internationally, you are doing fine for yourself in a time of major uncertainty. One thing that was very uncertain, though, was what was up with the finish between Michelle Waterson vs. Carla Esparza, the only women's MMA fight coming at a UFC 249. Who really won that bout there? And so, to those of you who are unaware, Michelle Waterson fought against Carla Esparza at the UFC 249 event, and there are major heavy implications going on in the women's fight division if either fighter were to win convincingly in that card. And in that card, I predicted Michelle Waterson beating out Carla Esparza, though Carla Esparza was the favorite in that bout. And the reason why I said Michelle Waterson was going to defeat Carla Esparza was off the basis that I think coming to this fight, Michelle Waterson is going to go poke Carla Esparza. And if you look at all of Carla Esparza's last recent 3 fights, Esparza has a tendency of tightening up her grip and tightening up in her boxing. So when you look at, just looking at UFC 245, you recognize that Michelle Waterson, her stance is she has a lot more wider stance, and she's utilizing and maximizing her reach as much as she can, going in for leg kicks, maximizing her reach with her jabs. Meanwhile, Carla Esparza is very tight. Her elbows are tucked in very close to her chest. Her stance isn't all that wide. It's very linear and very tight. And so she's like not utilizing at all any sense of reach. She's not using any boxing. She's not using any leg kicks. For the most part, she's just, her Carla Esparza's strategy in that fight was to dive in close, hit some uppercuts because she's really good at hitting uppercuts, do some dirty boxing, lay takedown, score some points. That was how I predicted Carla Esparza was going to win that fight. I chose Michelle Waterson winning that fight because I think Michelle Waterson's boxing ability is much superior. Her karate ability was much superior than Carla Esparza. That Esparza would have a hard time trying to gauge the distance, trying to close in the distance onto Michelle Waterson. The fight went pretty much exactly in my head how I thought it would be. And that Waterson's poking Esparza constantly with jabs, like jab, 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 leg kick, jab, jab, leg kick, body kick, jab, 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 1-2, jab. So she's constantly hitting Carla Esparza with a multitude of jabs from far away. They're not doing that significant amount of damage. I don't really think so. You ever say who it's harder, Carla Esparza or Michelle Waterson? Carla Esparza. But who actually did the most strikes in total? You would say Michelle Waterson. And so throughout the entire fight, then, it was Michelle Waterson was the one backing off away from Carla Esparza, while Esparza was chasing after Michelle Waterson. In multiple cases, whenever Esparza would go lean in or go towards or try to barrel her way through into the pocket of Michelle Waterson, Waterson would go immediately like hightail the other direction, go run away, do some jabs, do some quick leg kicks here, and she would go and push away Carla Esparza with some high kicks also, or she would try to threaten Carla Esparza with a high kick or an axe kick in order to push Esparza away, and then continuing on with the jabs. Michelle Waterson fought a really smart fight here, but the problem though with Waterson is that is like because her fighting style doesn't seem that how do I say this? Because Waterson isn't really much of a hard-hitting fighter. What you don't really count her signature strikes as much though. So if Michelle Waterson were to jab you 10 times, 10 times, those 10 punches don't look all that impressive. They really don't though. Carla Esparza for the most part has been eating a bunch of the jabs of Michelle Waterson, but if Carla Esparza hits you like 2-3 times, then then you go look at Michelle Waterson's face, you'd be like, oh wow, my gosh, Carla Esparza really messed up, really won the exchanges there against Waterson. But if you were looking at all the exchanges then, you would say, okay, Esparza hit Waterson harder, but Waterson hit Esparza more. And when you look at every round, also I predicted that Michelle Waterson's grappling ability, she's really good at the clinch, she's really good at jiu-jitsu, her reverse wrestling game and defense takedown is really exceptionally great. And so if Esparza were to take the Michelle Waterson, which Esparza has done, she did in this fight, she wouldn't have that much ground control, she really wouldn't. Yeah, she would score a point for takedowns, but I'm also a firm believer that if someone were to stuff a takedown, or to prevent someone from even taking them down in the first place, were to sprawl properly, or were able to get out of a bad position, they should be given some points, especially if they do not accumulate that much damage when the other person was controlling them in the wrestling game. So Esparza did in fact control Esparza controlled Waterson for maybe like 17 seconds, I think, in my opinion. When I saw like 17 seconds, takedown, Esparza is working, Waterson in the ground here, and then Waterson just a couple seconds later gets back up, and she held onto Esparza's hand during the takedown, so there's not really much ground and pound. Michelle Waterson has successfully defended Esparza's takedown attempts more often than Esparza was able to successfully land a takedown or do much in the ground on Waterson when she did go for the takedown. So I thought, okay, in this fight here, Waterson defeats Esparza in terms of cumulative strikes. And Esparza, she only really got Waterson a handful of times, maybe like 6 strikes per round. 6 significant strikes. I say Carla Esparza got Waterson about 6 significant strikes in each round. So she got like 18 significant strikes. And Esparza, she may have won a couple of exchanges only because she just hits harder, so it just looks more impressive to the camera and to the judges that she won in some of the exchanges then. But I would say that Waterson won in every round off the basis when you count a total accumulation of strikes she laid onto Esparza, and the fact that she was able to defend, Waterson was able to defend herself from the takedown defense. Also the fact that Esparza, although she's a hard hitter, her hard hits weren't as significant enough to really stop the pacing of Waterson through all 3 rounds. The one time that I thought Esparza did really well in overwhelming Michelle Waterson was by the 1 minute mark of the 3rd round. And that's because, and that's when I think there was like swelling in the eye of Waterson, and that Carla Esparza laid Michelle Waterson with a flurry of punches. It looked really good. It was the one moment in the fight that I thought Esparza really got Waterson onto the cage. It was a really good showing in that brief couple seconds there. I genuinely believe Esparza, over the 3 rounds, in that brief, like 1 minute, defeated Michelle Waterson. But if I were to count this fight accumulatively over 3 rounds, I pick Waterson winning the fight. And then the fight ends with a decision. The judges score it 30-27, Michelle Waterson. 29-28, Carla Esparza. 30-27, Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza defeats Michelle Waterson via split decision, and everybody looked at the camera and gave that shocked O-face. Immediately when Bruce Buffer said, winner of this fight by split decision, 30-27, Carla Esparza. Michelle Waterson immediately, her eyes beamed at the camera, and her mouth went wide. It was like, what? And then Esparza looks also at the camera and gave a really shocked look, like, wow, I won the fight, wow. And then you look at all the cornermen people who were right next to these fighters, and they gave like this weird head shake, being like, what just happened? Then you hear Cormier, you hear Cormier saying, wow, that was an interesting decision by the judges there. Then Joe Rogan grabs the mic, he goes over to Esparza and says, hey Carla, tell me, in your honest opinions, did you actually win that fight? And Esparza's like, well, I guess I did. And then Waterson's in the background just shaking her head, like laughing it off, like, I lost this fight? Are you kidding me? Like, I fought really well. For us up. And then Waterson walks off. Carla Esparza walks away with her head shaking also. And the sad part about this is that nobody really wins from this. Although Esparza defeated Michelle Waterson, good for Michelle Waterson. I mean, good for Carla Esparza having her record show that she won the fight. She's in, I think, a 3-fight or 4-fight win streak. Good on her for that. But this performance she had against Michelle Waterson wasn't impressive enough in order to get her way into fighting somebody in the top 5 of the strawweight division. I don't really think so. This fight was so close and so strange on how the judges scored it. If you look at the UFC app, there's an app for the UFC. If you look at the UFC app, After it was announced Carla Esparza won the fight, the app said Michelle Waterson won the fight. So the person who was even like programming and putting down the app stuff, even they were confused on the result of this fight. So what was happening here? Everyone was generally confused about the results of this fight. Some people say, I say Waterson should have won that fight. A lot of people say that Waterson should have won that fight, but you can't leave it to the judge's decision. You can't. And so Esparza won the fight, and now both of these fighters, despite being, I think they're ranked 7 and 8th, are going to be stuck there around the outside the top 5 zone. Hopefully, both fighters can bounce back from this, and we can expect a better version of Carla Esparza and Michelle Waterson. Now we'll be returning after the short break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the podcast here. So what is next for Carla Esparza and Michelle Waterson after their very controversial fights? Well, let's see what happens next here. Carla Esparza says she wants a rematch with Claudia Gadelha after UFC 249 win over Waterson. Then I'm very skeptical on that, considering that Carla Esparza's performance on Michelle Waterson isn't impressive enough to warrant a match against Claudia Gadelha. But let's see here. Carla Esparza beat Michelle Waterson with a split decision Saturday on the prelim card at UFC 249 in Jacksonville, Florida. Take a look, and it shows a bunch of other stats here. So this is Carla Esparza's opinion on the fight. Victory's always great. I wish I would have done a little bit more in the fight to really secure that thought in people's heads that I'm really working my way towards title contention. But a win's a win. We definitely say people underestimate my striking, but honestly, in my head, I didn't think I'd get that much opportunity to strike. My takedowns weren't really landing, so I'm glad I let my hands go. Esparza on her opinion on this position, that freaked me out. I was really shocked. At the very least, I thought it might have been 29-28. I thought I definitely had secured the first round and the third round, so I'm just glad it came out my way. Esparza on what she wants next, I've been calling Claudia Gadelha out a while ago for a rematch, and I heard she recently called me out. I think that's a fight we both want, and I'd love for that to happen soon. So she's aiming for a fight against Claudia Gadelha. I think Claudia Gadelha, she's also outside the confines. I think she's number 6 ranked. Yeah, she's number 6 ranked. She's outside the top 5 in the women's strawweight division. So this does make sense for Esparza to be matched up against Claudia Gadelha. Now, I don't think she should be calling out anybody, considering the fact that Once again, you're outside the top 5 and your performance wasn't all that impressive. I know I'm being a little bit too hard on Esparza, and it's because her striking ability was pretty much nullified for the most part against Waterson. And when you get to the top 5, when you're fighting against strikers who are much more dangerous and much more better than Waterson, it's hard to put over how impressed I can be to the striking of Esparza. Also for the fact that Michelle Waterson, for as good as she is as a grappler and as a reverse wrestler in a jiu-jitsu game or submission game, I see she's like top 5 best submission specialist in the women's strike division. Even so, the fact that Carla Esparza is supposed to be this really, really strong, good wrestler, right? But yet she can't go for a takedown on somebody who's outside the top 5 of the strike divisions. That's the weird, that's the thing that's not selling me for Esparza, really. I think there's a lot for her to improve on in order for her to take the next step into getting to title contention. Once again, Tatiana Suarez is out, Nina Ansaroff is out, Joanna Jacek is out, Weili Zhang is out, Jessica Andrade, she's off eating McDonald's. And so there's a huge opening for the strike division, and I'm disappointed that Carla Esparza didn't make the most out of this, even though she won. The good thing though is that she won, and it's in the record books, and she's on a winning streak, so she does have an argument to maybe fight somebody who is within the top 5. So how's Michelle Waterson responding to the controversial loss here? So former Invicta Atomweight champion Michelle Waterson has issued a statement after a controversial decision loss to former UFC strawweight champion Carla Esparza at UFC 249. And here's what she said is on her Instagram. Blessed to have the opportunity to do what I love, learn and grow as a martial artist, just like in life. The fight doesn't always go your way. Thank you for the dance at Carla Esparza 1. Thank you at Dana White and all the UFC staff for making this happen. I also want to thank all my teammates and coaches who gave me their time and energy. I have the most amazing people in my corner, and I have the most amazing fans. Thank you, as always, showing me some love. And then it goes her saying, like, she specifies who her trainers are, like, at Warren, at Miss Borg, MMA, at Selena Haga. Michelle Waterson is in a 2-fight losing streak against Carla Esparza and Joanna Jacek. What is next for Michelle Waterson? Pretty much in the same spot as Carla Esparza. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza rematch, early wins, or Waterson arguing her way into fighting against Claudia Gadelha. Or maybe Claudia Gadelha is going to challenge one of those two fighters, whoever she picks, and that's who they're going to fight. Really, I'm unsure. Carla Esparza and Michelle Waterson are both in the same situation where they were at before both of them fought. So what's next for these two fighters? You know, I really don't know, actually. I really don't know. I'm expecting these two to fight again, hopefully by the end of this year, and maybe it'll be a more impressive performance. Maybe we can see a more better all-around game from Esparza, and maybe we'll see a more active game, more aggressive game, because I say this, Michelle Waterson was way too passive. She fought smart, but here's something that me and my friends and a lot of analysts agree with. If you're fighting a very smart, calculating fight, then you're fighting like a champion. But if you're fighting super reckless and aggressive, then you're fighting as a challenger. And it's more warranted for a challenger to fight reckless than it is for a champion. Michelle Waterson isn't a champion, she's a challenger, and at this moment in her career right now, she's kind of a journeyman in the women's strike division. So, Waterson fought smart, kind of like Dominic Cruz actually, where like, they both fight really smart, and you know they're very smart in their striking game. They both work for the UFC. Sometimes they appear at ESPN or Fox as analysts, so they know and understand the fight game. But I tend to think that they kind of overthink their strategy, and they overthink their fight game too much, to the point that they're losing out in the judges' decisions at time, or they're losing out to the fans, or they're not fighting how they should be. It's weird. They fight like champions when they're not champions, and because they try to fight like champions, they're placed in a difficult corner, difficult spot, where they gotta fight not like a champion, but fight like a very reckless, aggressive, trying to claw your way up into the rankings, because you want to be as impressive as you possibly can while you're climbing up the rankings in order to buy your way in for a championship fight. And these two fighters, Dominic Cruz and Michelle Waterson, they're pretty much like, hey, I should fight for the championship because I fought like a champion, instead of, I should fight against the champion because I've been steamrolling everybody in the rankings. It's the reverse Francis Ngannou, where Francis Ngannou fights super reckless. Justin Gaethje in his entire career fights super reckless. But because of that recklessness, and because of that high demand they fill the role in UFC mid-cards of being the exciting fight that people can walk away. Yeah, look, that guy's not a champion, but man, he was a really exciting fighter, wasn't he? That's how it is for Francis Ngannou. It's like, yeah, Francis Ngannou, he's definitely not a champion. He doesn't fight like a champion at all. But boy, that guy is incredibly exciting. He's fun to watch, and whenever I see the guy in a fight, for the most part, it's very exciting. Francis Ngannou is fighting how a challenger should when they climb up the ranks, and not as a champion, because he technically fought smarter in his fight against Derek Lewis, and that fight was a complete bore. And I can safely say nobody enjoyed watching that fight. Nobody did. No matter how much Joe Rogan can argue he's fighting the smart fight, or he's fighting like a mature, developed fighter. No, it's not enjoyable to watch. And if your fight isn't enjoyable, then you're not going to be seen as marketable. And if you're not seen as marketable, then the UFC aren't going to push you, and you're not going to get as much leeway in the rankings. But you know what? Waterson and Dominic Cruz, they work as analysts also on top of being fighters, so they get double the pay, so good on them. Also, big 2 thumbs up for Carla Esparza for making a whole lot of money. She made $40K more than Waterson, which is really impressive for Carla Esparza. She was a former champion, and now that she's calling out Claudia Cadella, if she can beat Claudia Cadella, she gets to top 5. Michelle Waterson, if she can bounce back from her 2 losses and win 2 more consecutive times, then Waterson has an argument to go into the top 5 also. And maybe you might see Carla Esparza versus Michelle Waterson sometime in the near future. I'm not really sure, but who knows? Maybe from a year from now, we might see these two be in the top 5. Who knows? And as I am talking about Michelle Waterson, it is noted here, I got a YouTube recommendation here on the site here about Chael Sonnen talking about Michelle Waterson versus Carla Esparza, and I already saw the video. It's just recommended to me again. But he pretty much goes on to the fact that, like, how did Carla Esparza came to this fight as a grapple-heavy competitor, and she didn't lay any successful takedown. She did one, but really she didn't really do much from it. And Chael says, like, what the heck? The striker who was able to keep her wrestler opponent on the stand-up lost the fight? What the heck? And now he's arguing that Michelle Waterson should go up to 125, and I know for a fact that she walks around generally at like 135, 140. And Waterson has stated that she does not want to fight lower at the 105, because she did compete at a very, very light division. I think 105. Yeah, 105. She competed for the atomweight division when she was a champion. So, would Michelle Waterson do well for herself in a 125-pound division? Although she is small, I think she's fighting where she should be. I really do believe. I think Michelle Waterson is fighting exactly the right weight where she should be, which is 115. The only problem, though, for Michelle Waterson, though, is because she fights way too passive. I found an interesting comment here that said, I just feel like Michelle Waterson's not aggressive enough. Like, she seems super hesitant, like she's waiting too long for someone to bring the fight to her so she can counter. And judges score these fights based on aggression. Carla Esparza was the much more aggressive fighter than Waterson. So that's why I think she gets a point in the decision victory over Waterson. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA podcast, coming back right after the short break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back. So the one and only women's fight coming up for tonight, that is of Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira, has Ciara Eubanks versus Sarah Moraz. This is coming in from DraftKings Nation. And the only women's bout on the card at UFC Jacksonville, bantamweight Ciara Eubanks versus Sarah Moraz will do battle tonight in the VyStar Veterans Memorial Arena. The fight is part of the prelim card, which started at ESPN Plus at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Eubanks is 5-4 in her career and the 15th ranked fighter in her division. She made the Ultimate Fighter Finals, but was unable to compete in the championship. Moraz is 5-6 in her career and had lost 3 in a row before a win over Liana Soja last September. Eubanks' popularity from the television show and her record might both be factors here, as both of the favorites on tonight's card have a greater percentage of bets than handle. It's the opposite of the 35-year-old Massachusetts native, who has been bet up as a 1-4 chalk anyway. Here are the betting splits for DraftKings here, and Sarah Eubanks is coming in as the favorite at a -360 to -400, while Sarah Moraz here is coming in at a +280, +295 here. Ciara Eubanks was my prediction to go win this fight, and when I look at these fighters match up perfectly well, I think Ciara Eubanks is more of a all-around better fighter than Moraz here. Moraz has a tendency of kind of being overwhelmed by aggressive fighters here, and when you look at Eubanks versus Moraz here, I say Moraz will get overwhelmed by Eubanks, and that's why I'm picking Eubanks to go win this fight. Montreal's Corinne Laframboise set sights on a UFC contract, showing down the list of French-Canadian UFC fighters. Legendary GSP appears, but then there's a shortage of the ethnic group. Montreal's flyweight Corinne Laframboise, I'll just call her Corinne, looks to add her name on the list and stamp her legacy in becoming the next great French-Canadian UFC fighter. We had Valerie Letourneau that competed in the UFC, who's from Montreal. I look forward to being the second woman to get there. Corinne said in French, there's only a standby period right now due to the coronavirus. She's a victory or two away from getting a UFC contract and ready to be called as a replacement, she added. If it's not this year, it will be the year after, where I will get the flyweight belt. It's an objective. I don't know how I'll get it, but it'll be with victories and more visibility. I will do whatever it takes, so I am stubborn, so watch out. I will make it happen. In January, Koreans defeated Cornelia Holm via split decision at UAE Warriors 10 at Abu Dhabi, improving her record to 5-3. The Canadian flyweight can now reach out to other promotions since she's no longer under contract with TKO MMA. There's been contact with Invicta FC, and UAE Warriors have approached Corinne for her next fight. They asked me if I was interested in fighting there. The experience was amazing. I am going to get my next victory there before entering the UFC, she said. The UFC is the next promotion I really want. We have a lot of opportunities. We love MMA in Germany is another possible opportunity, but I am looked to stay in Abu Dhabi than the UFC. MMA debut in Hanover, Germany. 3 years ago, Corinne made her pro MMA debut in Germany at We Love MMA 28. She had 3 years of experience in Jiu-Jitsu, while her opponent, Dilara Kokak, was a K1 and Muay Thai champion. I think it's Koshak or Kokak. I say go for Koshak. Koshak got the first hits in the beginning of the fight. I wasn't going to keep going like that, Corinne said. We are going to go straight for the ground. It ended well for me. I won by armbar in the first round, but she broke my jaw. I had a double fracture to my jaw coming out of there. I remember getting up and noticed a space between my bottom teeth, and I told myself, oh no, my tooth turned around. My boss is going to freak out on me. She told her coach, Fabio Hollanda, that she was in pain. Yeah, but now you're in the pain business, girl, he replied. The popularity of MMA in Quebec has been increasing, but the options of MMA gyms in the region is still limited. Corinne grew up in South Shore of Montreal and practiced gymnastics for 14 years before transitioning to Jiu-Jitsu. Afterwards, she moved to Montreal because gyms were more accessible there. When Karine trained in the West Island, driving from Mont-Saint-Hilaire to Dorval for boxing training became an expense. A move to Montreal became ideal since Brazilian top team is in downtown Montreal. The Canadian flyweight enjoyed competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments, but it didn't produce the finances she needed to sustain for a living. Since she came in at second at Canada's classification, she had to pay for a trip to Abu Dhabi for the 2016 World Professional Jiu-Jitsu Championship. Finances in the balance while chasing her MMA career. I've talked about how hard it is for an MMA fighter to, be financially stable, considering the fact that your pay, kind of varies year by year. I paid for my flight and risked it at my expense. The financial expenses reminded me that I had to go all in, she said. I wasn't the richest, so I had to put in all my effort, and when I won, I was really happy. Karine won first place in the 62-kilogram female blue adult category. Before sponsorships, she was working 60 hours a week between jobs at the bar and work at a dental clinic. I was doing my BA in psychology, and my ex and I, at the time, wanted children, so since I didn't want to wait until I had a PhD, Karine said, I went into dental hygiene since it was only 3 years of study. It's not something that lights me up. Of course, fighting lights me up even more, so it was only for the more practical side of things that I was going into it. Karine now finds income that's related to the fight game. She got her actor license for Canadian films and had a stunt role in Excel 6, a Toronto film about women's MMA. I need to pretend to be boxing based on camera angles, so the game is different. Now that I have my license, she said, I can think of an after career, so I'm not closing the door on my stunt career. Although there are Hollywood aspirations for the French Canadian, she's aiming for a UFC contract. You know what? Good on Karine. Good on Karine for being, multi-talented in several aspects of not just, mixed martial arts, but also in the outside world of, trying to make some money here. Making money is very difficult for a lot of fighters here. If you have not checked it out, then I recommend you do check out the GSMC MMA podcast, to which I talked about extensively about all the fighters who participated at UFC 249 and the money they made in the end here. The richest person coming out of the event was making $400K, but a lot of fighters there, even longtime veterans like Michelle Watterson and Jeremy Stevens, two longtime veterans of the UFC who are currently occupying the role as journeymen in the UFC in their respective divisions. They made about $60,000, and that's not including paying for your training camp, paying for your cornermen, paying for the equipment, paying for usage of the gym, paying for the food you need in order to go do the weight cut, and paying for all the resources, paying for flights. Really, being an MMA fighter is incredibly difficult finance-wise. There was a fighter earlier today in the Glover Teixeira versus Anthony Smith fights, to which I mentioned, okay, one fighter went over the weight limits. Went over the weight limit, and because they went over the weight limit, they won't be able to make as much money as they should be. And also, it also happened in UFC 249 when Jeremy Stevens came in at 150.5. Just being 0.5 pounds overweight, it then became a catchweight fight, and because of that, Jeremy Stevens' purse also got knocked down even a lot more. So really, being able to make a whole lot of money as an MMA fighter, even in the largest mixed martial arts organization in the world, is incredibly difficult. So I respect Karine in going to the field of dental hygienics or / psychology, because at least you're going. The average span of the career for a UFC fighter or for a mixed martial arts fighter goes below 40. It goes below 40, 35. Dominic Cruz retired at 31 and then came back at 35. Henry Cejudo is retiring at 33. And I like the fact, if you haven't heard Henry Cejudo's speech about what he's doing other than mixed martial arts, he went to college. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in theology. And so for Karine here, I think is it possible for someone to be a full-time UFC fighter and then work on your PhD or your master's? Because I've always thought about, I myself have thought about studying masters, studying masters in education. And in order for you to study in master's education, you have to, it's a full-time thing. It really is. 5 days, it's pretty much equivalent of working a job. You only have 2 days in the week to work out. And I was already overloading myself already in college, essentially, where I was taking a whole bunch of classes, filling myself out while working, And then I gotta work out also, doing some boxing on the side, doing some weightlifting and powerlifting training. It was just so much for me. And so I really do hope that Corinne's career in dental hygiene, although she doesn't really enjoy it per se, she doesn't get a thrill out of it, like the same how fighting does. Well, hopefully she's making some money from it, though. She's making some money from bartending or from working at a dental clinic and doing mixed martial arts. Altogether, she's being financially stable for herself. And you know what? Who knows? Maybe if she does get to the UFC, she'll go make a whole lot of money being a top-tier fighter. She could be the future. She could be the next great French-Canadian fighter in the UFC. And I can't wait to see it. She's also still fairly young. So if and when she does go to the UFC, that's somebody you should go look out for. And I'm excited. I'm excited for it. And so coming back right after the short break here, I'll be looking at some more MMA news right here at the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast. Coming back right after the short break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back here. So after UFC debut postponement, Maria Agapova hopes for a June date. Maria Agapova was going to make her UFC debut at UFC Fight Night Smith vs. Glover Teixeira, which was today, kind of. In a sense, however, multiple sources told WMMA Rankings that Shayna Dobson did not accept the fight. Matchmakers are looking for an opponent for a flyweight fight that would likely happen in June. Alex Davis, Gapova's manager, said he got her signed with the UFC exactly for UFC Kazakhstan. The Kazakhstan event got cancelled, but the UFC needs international fighters. I think we all have a fight very shortly for her, Davis said. I know that the matchmakers want her. She's a special fighter, looking at the big picture. The UFC needs to keep its international flavor. It can't just be having Americans fight. Agapova's last bout came in October when she got a first-round TKO over Marilla Santos at Invicta 37. Sadly, her fight got postponed, and hopefully she's going to do a really good performance coming in at the June date. It's probably going to be in Fight Island more than anything else. So, you know what? Her manager's saying, you know what? There should be some more international fighters, not just American fighters going at it. Well, who knows? She could be fighting at Fight Island, the mystical Fight Island that still nobody knows where exactly it is, except for Dana White and a small group of people. And so this is coming in from SB Nation, to which Curtis Blades takes issue with female MMA stars taking preferential treatment based on sexy looks, not fighting skills. This is Curtis Blades saying it, not me. When you think of mixed martial arts MMA beefs, you normally don't imagine a male and female fighter going at it at pressers or through social media. Sure, we recently had Henry Cejudo and Valentin Shevchenko trading barbs, but that was, by the way, Shevchenko versus Henry Cejudo, that would be a fun fight to see. I honestly wouldn't know who would win that fight. But that was all the for grins and giggles. And we also have Ronda Rousey's beef with Brian Carway a few years back. Though it wasn't a direct result of rowdy sustain towards Miesha Tate. Recently, though, you had top UFC heavyweight contender Curtis Blades decided to take it upon himself to criticize a select few female MMA stars whom he says are solely getting pushed from promotions based on how they look in a bikini instead of their actual fighting abilities. Furthermore, Razor, Curtis Blades, says a female fighter earning her keep in that manner is similar to how a stripper earns in a living. Wow, what the heck? Dude, you are not oh my goodness. So, Curtis Blades is definitely going to be reprimanded for this. I'm a girl dad, so let me make this clear. I'm not against female athletes getting publicity and media push and love from fans when it's deserved and it's earned through legitimate hard work and grinding, he said via social media posts. My issue is, why do so many female athletes complain and gripe about being overly sexualized by fans, media, but then at the same time, many of them are profiting off said sexualization through media endorsements, high profile placements on fight cards, and overall popularity, which leads to many other financial opportunities. I don't hate hustling either, like that's how a female wants to pay her bills through her body, which is what many strippers do, and I have no problem with either hustle, but you can't live life that way and expect to garner the same type of respect and love you get from real grinders get. Alright then. You can't have your cake and your ice cream, pick one. Either you're gonna hustle and make money off your athletic achievements and skill set, or you're gonna hustle and sell bikini pics and forfeit respect hard work and sweat brings. I wonder, who exactly is Curtis Blades specifically picking on? Curtis Blades then singled out Paige Van Zandt and Rachel Ostovich as two UFC fighters he says are prime examples of getting media love and promotional push without producing inside the cage. So immediately when I read this headline, I thought Paige Van Zandt, just because I thought Paige Van Zandt and Sage Northcutt, if you told me those two were like brothers and sisters, I wouldn't argue against you. I'm like, look at these two. These are like two like picture perfect, like they look like custom fighters. They look like the custom fighters that a lot of like old schooly American dudes would like create when they're making like their default pro wrestler on SmackDown vs. Raw. I don't know. I say, but Paige Van Zandt and Sage Northcutt, their identity is based around this idea that they're like physical perfection. It's weird. It's weird how it is, but if you follow like Sage Northcutt's like YouTube, like Sage Northcutt's like, look up a Sage Northcutt YouTube video, and you'll see all the comments make fun of Sage Northcutt for being this pretty boy who like doesn't look like he's a tough SOB. And then you have a lot of people who like make comments on Paige Van Zandt's YouTube videos. If there's a video of like Paige Van Zandt and she's like boxing or something, or she's posting something on Instagram, there's a lot of creepy guys out there who's like posting weird stuff about how much like they're simping for Paige Van Zandt. It's very strange. So when I see Curtis Blades here saying like, you know what, there's some fighters out there, they're super good looking and they know they're good looking and they're posting themselves out there, I thought Paige Van Zandt, because objectively, Paige Van Zandt is an attractive looking woman. I can easily say that as a guy. But also, I kind of understand, because it's not just Curtis Blades here. Like, there are other women fighters who have a personal disdain for a fighter like Paige Van Zandt, because for some reason she's like booked heavily strong, and she's always highlighted and presented in some way or marketed in some way in these UFC shows. She's main evented and co-main evented a lot of UFC fight shows, even though she's practically was still a rookie in MMA. I would say at this point she kind of is a veteran of mixed martial arts at this point now. But she had a lot of main event and co-main events that really weren't warranted, and a lot of people up to now are still like dogging her on like Instagram, Twitter, and on social media about it. It's like, what the heck? You're just only in the main event because you're pretty. So Curtis Blades goes on more saying, so you telling me Paige Van Zandt and Rachel Osta whatever, I'm not joking, he says whatever, Osta whatever, actually deserve time to remain on UFC's roster for their athletic achievements, and they are not just on cards for their sex appeal, he said? Because if I'm wrong about that, then I guess the whole premise of my original statement is wrong, and I apologize. But if you're a legit fan of MMA, you couldn't possibly believe the two females I mentioned are on the roster for anything other than the fact that they look good in bikinis. And this leads to something else. After being labeled by Blades as a sexy fighter, what the heck? After being labeled by Blades as a sexy fighter who loves posting bikini pics yet has failed to evolve as a fighter over the last 5 years, Invicta FC combatant Pearl Gonzalez fired back. A fighter complaining how my looks keep me relevant and my skills haven't improved. The fact that you are today years old and still can't speak a full sentence blows my mind, she said. After Blades defended his speech impediment, he challenged Gonzalez to defend that he perceived as a lack of growth as an MMA combatant. I'm going to stray away from this right now because it then leads to both of them throwing out all these personal insults to each other. What it boils down to, really, this isn't just applied towards Paige Van Zandt specifically. What Curtis Blade's saying isn't out of the realm of equation here. It's the fact that, because it also applies to like a fighter like Sage Northcutt, it does. And to an extent like Mickey Gall. I remember, how do I say? Okay, so the idea of like promoting somebody based on looks isn't anything new. It really isn't. If you guys remember, like in Japan, Bob Sapp was considered the number one guy in mixed martial arts. He went to the K1 finals 3 times, won 2 of them, and then went to the third one, and the third one is kind of iffy since like it's rumored that he threw that fight away. But you know what? Bob Sapp, we know now that he's not a good fighter. Bob Sapp is not a good fighter. I would even say he was never really even a good fighter. He was never a good mixed martial artist. He looked great. He looked the part. Like him, Todd Duffy, Jason Thompson, and Tank Abbott. Yeah. So those guys, and also like Alistair Uberim when he was jacked. They all look like guys that you want to promote in the front of your mixed martial arts show. Like, go watch Invicta FC, or go watch UFC 97, and look at this. I remember Brock Lesnar versus Alistair Overeem when they promoted those 2 fighters. They're like 6'5" versus 6'3", 270 pounds. This fight is going to be amazing. You know why? Because they're both big. And so the concept of like people looking good in order to appeal to a certain demographic out there, it's nothing new. It really isn't. Is it fair? No, I say it's not fair. It's not fair that some people do have some leeway in terms of the looks, but that's how the fight game is. The UFC in mixed martial arts has never been fair. It really hasn't. It would be good, it would be nice if we lived in a fair world, but that's not the reality of things. If you look over the salaries of every fighter who made money in UFC 249, it doesn't make a lick of sense. While you have some journeyman fighters out there making just under 100K, you got some fighters out there who don't have a good performance, but are still making 100K. And then you got some fighters there who are making $14,000 in that night. Jurgen Castro made $14,000 in that night. So you know what, Curtis Blades, I'm sorry, but mixed martial arts in the world of the UFC is not fair. It really isn't, and that's the sad reality of things. In this business, you just have to do what's best for you, and that's being selfish, but kind of is the truth. Coming back after the short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And welcome back here. So I found an interesting article by rue.ufc.com that's labeled The Rise of Women's MMA, flashback to 2017 on the eve of UFC 215 as the golden age of women's MMA hit its strides. Actually, I gotta say right now, currently how it is, women's MMA is at its very best right now. Actually, I would say this is the golden age of women's MMA. Although it's not that popular as the era of Ronda Rousey, still, we currently live in a great time right now for women's mixed martial arts. The article starts off with, UFC President Dana White laughs at it now, but in 2011, he was adamant that women would never fight in the octagon. It wasn't a sexist comment, but one based on the realities of the female mixed martial arts scene at the time. Yes, there was a host of talented athletes competing, but the gap between the haves and have-nots in terms of talent was wide, leading to several notable mismatches. But White has always led the UFC with a never-say-never attitude. So when an Olympic bronze medalist in judo named Ronda Rousey began competing for the Zuffa-owned Strikeforce promotion, he had to take a second look. Ronda Rousey was a different breed in not just women's MMA, but in MMA as a whole. She was a talented, hard-working, and determined force of destruction on Fight Night, but also a striking, quotable, and charismatic figure outside of competition. Add in her Olympic pedigree and compelling backstory, and White was intrigued. So much so that after Rousey's Strikeforce debut with Miesha Tate was over, he seriously considered bringing the women's bantamweight division to the UFC, and in late 2012, he announced that it was going to happen, with Ronda Rousey, the UFC's first female champion, to defend her new title against Liz Camacho in the main event of UFC 157 on February 23, 2013. Ronda Rousey is the real deal, White said at the time. She's nasty, she's mean, she's like Chuck Liddell, but goes out there and tries to finish her opponents. Wait, what? Chuck Liddell tries to, what? She's mean, she's nasty, she's like Chuck Liddell. She goes out there and tries to finish her opponents. I thought it was a dig on Chuck Liddell. It's like, unlike Chuck Liddell, she actually knocks out everyone she faces. And Kamachi is tough as nails too. She was a Marine and she's got a great ground and pound. I look forward to having the woman join the UFC. And at the Honda Center in Anaheim, Ronda Rousey and Kamachi delivered, with the champion surviving a spirited effort by a challenger before submitting her in the first round. The revolution had begun. Soon, the best female bantamweights in the world began fighting under the UFC banner. Thrilling fans around the globe, leading the way was Rousey, a dominant champion who was the perfect ambassador for the sport, drawing praise from all quarters, including female fighter pioneer Gina Carano. Going to the UFC fights, I remember sitting up in the last row and thinking, someday, she said, and being able to watch her other women experience that and doing it with such confidence, it's really changed a lot. At one point, it was bad to be female and walk in the gym, and people would understand that. But now, they're all looking for the next female fighter that's going to make it. When I was training, it was a lot harder. Now, little girls can put on, gis at whatever age, and not having to be seeing them struggle through what I kind of went through really has an emotional impact on me. In 2013, the Ultimate Fighter introduced women to the series, with Juliana Pena winning the Season 18 title, and in 2014, the UFC brought in a second women's division, with the 115-pound strawweights being featured on Season 20 at TUF, the Ultimate Fighter. When the dust settled in at that season, Carla Esparza emerged as not just a TUF 20 winner, but the UFC's first strawweight champion, and I say right now, the UFC strawweight division is incredibly stacked, it's tough, and there's a multitude of matchups there that I'll love to see in the strawweight division, led by Weili Zhang, currently as of right now. That's quite a whirlwind journey, but the ladies enjoyed it as they paved the way for a new generation of female mixed martial artists that are now able to compete on the sport's premier stage and gain the respect they deserved for so many years. It's extremely satisfying because that was my goal from the very beginning, Ronda Rousey said. I wanted to gain the respect of people that I respected and I knew that I was capable. It's funny, but you can see on some old interviews that I did where I said, I'm going to make these people love me, I'm going to make these people respect me, and all I have to do is win and win impressively. It's not like they're going to put me in the middle of an arena and be like, oh, here's a model airplane, put it together in 60 seconds. I have no idea how to do that. But my mom was making me drill judo and arm bars and being a fighter and an athlete ever since I can remember. I can remember not being an athlete. I can't remember not being an athlete. It's just doing what comes naturally. And I feel like I've always been deserving of that respect, but I had to do things to earn it. In 2015, the ladies segment of the sport continued to grow, and as the rest of the mainstream world took notice with exciting development in mixed martial arts, attention skyrocketed, with Ronda Rousey earning the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine, where she was described as the most dominant athlete in sports. I remember during this period of time, Joe Rogan would go onto his podcast and say, Ronda Rousey can defeat anybody. Everyone from the head. I'd like to see Ronda Rousey versus Brock Lesnar, I'd like to see, Ronda Rousey. She can take on the Manny Pacquiao's and Floyd Mayweather's in the world. Honestly, if Mayweather were to go fight against Ronda Rousey, I could see Ronda Rousey killing Floyd Mayweather. Not my words, Joe Rogan's words. It's a very different time. Obviously now, Joe Rogan and a lot of analysts kind of turned their back on Ronda Rousey. I was like, hey, Ronda Rousey, she wasn't as good as we thought she was. She was a really great fighter. Just her mentality of the sport has changed. In 2015, the ladies segment opened. Meanwhile, a Polish powerhouse named Joanna Jędrzejczyk introduced herself with a stirring second-round knockout of Carla Esparza that earned her the UFC Women's Strawweight title. Fight fans immediately embraced Joanna's champion, who successfully defended her title with wins over Jessica Penn, and Valerie Letourneau. The latter win coming out at UFC 193 event in Melbourne, Australia, which was headlined by Ronda Rousey's title defense against Holly Holm and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Why so historic? Not just because two women's bouts headlined a UFC event, but because they did it in front of a record crowd of 56,214 fans in the Etihad Stadium. The night, though, involved the knockout of Holly Holm knocking out Ronda Rousey. The night Holm, a former 3-division world boxing champion, shocked the world when she knocked Ronda Rousey in the second round and took her bantamweight crown. After I was landing a few good straight lefts, I knew that I had it if I didn't lose focus, Holm said. Anything can happen there, and I didn't want to let my guard down, thinking that this is going to be an easy track because there's no way that would be an easy task to take down Ronda Rousey, so I did feel confident in being able to time her, and I just needed to make sure to stay focused and not put my guard down at any time. I thought if there's a good opening, just take it. And there wound up being an opening, so I went for it. 4 months later, it was home on the receiving end of a stirring upset with Miesha Tate submitting the Albuquerque native in the 5th round to cause another shift in the 135-pound crown. But the musical chairs didn't stop as Amanda Nunes removed the title from Miesha Tate, and from that point on, continued to be the most dominant bantamweight women's champion of all time. One would argue right now that Amanda Nunes is currently the greatest women's fighter of all time in all mixed martial arts. Meanwhile, Joanna Jędrzejczyk continues to dominate the 115-pound weight class with wins including Claudia Cadella, Kayla Kowalewicz, and Jessica Andrade that lifted her to superstar status and was her thinking that her reign is going to last as long as she wants it to. I want to be an undefeated champion, and I hope I will stay humble and I'll work hard enough to be an undefeated champion and retire as an undefeated champion, she said. Before her win over Andrade, I don't know what is going to happen. Maybe soon, maybe next year, maybe 2 years. I feel great. I'm enjoying my life, and I want to keep doing what I'm doing, keep winning and defending this belt. Yet, while this bantamweights and strawweights have thrilled the UFC in the last 4+ years, Nunes and Joanna Jędrzejczyk made way for the featherweights in 2017, with Germaine Randomé winning the first 145-pound title by defeating Holly Holm at UFC 208. And while the reign of the Iron Lady did not last long, it appears that the new champion, former Strikeforce and Invicta FC title champion Chris Cyborg, will have a long stay at the top after a dominant title winning effort over Tonya Evinger at UFC 214 in July. So, with Chris Cyborg being champion, Joanna Jędrzejczyk being champion, Amanda Nunes being champion, who would reign up to the top? And it would be Amanda Nunes. Out of those three there, we would say, okay, so who's the greatest women's fighter, greatest women's champion of all time? One would say Joanna, one would say Chris Cyborg, one would say Ronda Rousey. But at this moment in time, in 2020, without a doubt, it's unanimously Amanda Nunes. All those women have lost their belts, with the exception of Nunes, and Nunes is expected to go face Felicia Spencer in the June pay-per-view. Early June, it's not sure yet whether Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer will be the main event. That fight will either be the co-main event or the main event of that night, and I'm excited to see it. And you know what? Who knows? People looked at Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey as a squash match. People thought Ronda Rousey was easily going to defeat Holly Holm. It didn't happen. From that moment on, Ronda Rousey's career pretty much went down after Holly Holm knocked her out. We might see the biggest upset of all time in Felicia Spencer defeating Amanda Nunes. Now, I don't think it's going to happen, but in the world of UFC, in the world of mixed martial arts, anything can happen and anybody can beat anybody. And so, it'll be Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer coming up early June, and I expect to see fireworks. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back right after this short break here.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hello and welcome back. And so I like to end all my podcast episodes with something really silly, something dumb, something goofy, considering the fact that we live in a time of major uncertainty and there's a lot of negativity happening right now in the world, especially in the States, also especially in California. I like to end up with something a little, more upbeat or something a little bit more funny or goofy. So I found something here. This is coming in from www.sportsjoe.com. To which you can go take a quiz, and it'll tell you, depending on what your answers are, it's gonna judge you as a fighter. Dang! Wow, you know what? I don't need to train as a boxer, even though I have. I don't need to do some wrestling. I don't need to do some MMA. No jiu-jitsu. Nothing, no Muay Thai at all. All you gotta do is take this quiz right here, and it's gonna tell you what type of fighter you would hypothetically be. So once again, this is coming in from www.sportsjoe.ie here. And it's called Which UFC Fighter Are You? And it also is outdated. You can try this quiz at home, or you can follow along with me. And so, first question. The genre of your walkout song of choice is A. Something religious. B. An imposter chooses my songs for me. 3. Rap, although I'm probably too white to get away with it. 4. New metal, I have trouble letting go of the past. It's why I like these quizzes. It's because they don't take themselves too seriously. And there's this weird, like, ridiculousness aspect to it, though, which kind of opens up as to why you enjoy the dumb, silly stuff when it comes to mixed martial arts. The whole spectacle of mixed martial arts, when you get down to it, is really silly. So what song would I come out to in 2014? I would go out to new metal. I'll go out to Alien Ant Farm, without a doubt. Alright, I chose Alien Ant Farm, sweet. How did you choose your nickname? Well, my nickname is Gorby, which is passed on from my mom and dad. Nickname? Ain't nobody got time for that, that's A. B, I chose it when I was younger, and it just sort of stuck. Alright? C, I want to let people know where I'm from. D, because it rhymes with my real name. What the heck? Alright, so D is just and then C is, I want to let people know where I'm from. Whose nickname is, yo, I'm Arnel, California, De Leon, or I'm Arnel, Abu Dhabi, De Leon, Abu Dhabi, Abu Dhabi. No one's gonna chant that. Oh my gosh. Even Donald Cerrone, he's like, Donald, the Cowboy Cerrone. Cowboys were everywhere. Cowboys were everywhere in America. Even outside of America, there were cowboys. So, no. Alright. I say, I want to let people know where I'm from because I like the idea of people chanting Abu Dhabi when I go out to for arena or to an octagon, to a wrestling ring. What do your critics say is your biggest weakness is? Choking in big fights? That's A. B. Wrestling. C. What's a weakness? Is C implied that I'm an idiot? 4. Failing to make weights. I can cut weight pretty easily. I've fluctuated around. I can fluctuate about 25 pounds every 2 weeks. It's not all difficult for me to fluctuate like weight from 20 to 30 pounds in every 2 weeks. My biggest weakness, I'd go with choking in big fights. I guess I used to do competitive video games, and I used to do competitive fighting video games, and I would always like ease under the pressure. So I go for choking in big fights. What is your personality? Is it A, psychotic? What is your personality? Is it A, psychotic? B, confident, maybe verging on arrogant? C, a bit abrasive, I'm not afraid to speak my mind? Or D, warm and bubbly, I'm everyone's best friend? No. Am I psychotic? To an extent, kind of, yeah. Confident but verging on arrogant. That is pretty much me. I am psychotic when I have to go compete against somebody and something. If me and a friend are doing the exact same thing, I want to do it faster and better than him or her. What is the key to victory? Winning. But what is the key to victory? A, out wrestling your opponent. Well, if your opponent can't wrestle, then how can you out wrestle them? B, speed. C, heavy hands. C, heavy hands. D, technical ability. Heavy hands. For me, it is heavy hands. I'm not a speedy guy, and my forearm is very bad. Like Francis Ngannou pretty much is me if I was a fighter, to be honest with you. Very sloppy, but I can hit you hard. Who is your idol? Jesus, A. B, my parents. C, here's a long one. It really irks me when I see people worshipping false idols, and when they should really be worshipping me. 4, D, Royce Gracie. Is Royce Gracie's anyone idol? He's important, you can look up to him, but I wouldn't call him an idol. And then, E, GSP. Out of everyone here, Jesus, my parents, Royce Gracie, this one that I don't get, GSP. In a fighting scenario, I'd go for GSP. Of course, I'm Mormon, so I follow Jesus. But if I were to go by mixed martial arts standards, I'd go for GSP. Super nice guy. By the way, I use GSP's line of, you know what? I'm not impressed. And then the entire crowd are like, oh, he said he's unimpressed. And then GSP is like giggling to himself. That's one of the funniest moments ever in UFC. What belt are you? Blue belts. Another one, I don't think they make belts big enough. Are you implying that I'm fat? Because I'm pretty fit. black belts or brown belts? I personally, in real life, I had a yellow belt in Taekwondo, so that's not an option, which is like beginner level. I don't think they make belts big enough for me because I want the biggest belt possible. How did your last fight go? Is it A, great TKO victory, B, got the decision, C, I'd rather not talk about it, or D, sublime submission win? If it's just two people grappling, does that count as like a really victory? Like, if you're grappling and then like people came over and like, you know, threw you out of each other, then I don't know. I don't know how to count that really. The draw? I don't know. If two people are scrapping at each other and then a huge crowd comes in and breaks you up, I'm like, did you really win? You know what? It's a personal victory for me, so I got the decision. No, I knocked him out. Yeah, let's go with that. I knocked him out, definitely. How do you get inside your opponent's head before a fight? Is it A, the 1,000-yard stare? Well, I don't want to look at a guy 1,000 yards away. B, kill him with kindness. Oh, am I going to throw bubbles in his face? C, I don't worry about my opponents. I just do my own thing. D, trash talk. Yep, I trash talk. Yeah. I don't really trash talk. I kind of like dance in front of them. That's what I do when I did some competitive fighting games. Is I would, or if I do anything competitively against any opponent, any of my friends or family, I'd start like breakdancing in front of them as a way to like taunt them mentally. It's weird. People say you'll look like A, a bouncer, B, a surfer, C, a Viking, D, a serial killer. I have to go for a serial killer off the basis that I look like Yajirobe. No, he's like, you know why? Because people say I look like Yajirobe from Dragon Ball, and Yajirobe is a weird looking man. Alright then? He's a weird circle looking man with gray hair. So I go, and Yajirobe has killed people in the Dragon Ball show. So I have to go for serial killer. Because I look like Yajirobe. After fighting, you plan on... After fighting? Fighting in my MMA career or just in a fight? After fighting, you plan on A, moving out to the wilderness and being one with nature. B, living off my millions. I wish I could live off my millions. C, going into coaching. D, broadcasting. I'm bound to land a deal to get my own TV show. I want to be famous, gosh darn it. Broadcasting. In your spare time, you like to wear custom-made suits and endorse crisps. Endorse crisps? I do like to wear custom-made suits, actually. Play with my nunchucks. I used to play with my nunchucks, and then I hit myself with it. C, stay active. Try other sports to mix things up. D, eat. In my spare time? Before the coronavirus, I spent most of my day in the gym. But right now, I'm eating food a lot. I'm eating a bunch of food. I go with before coronavirus, I stay active. And so, I now get the results here. Wait, actually, I got one more question, apparently. I got one more question? I thought I'd get the results here. Ah, what the heck? It says here I have like 12 questions, but there's 13. What sets you apart from your competition? My knockout power, my vicious ground and pound, my stamina, my jiu-jitsu. I say knockout power. What type of fighter am I? And I am... Ooh, I'm Rory McDonald. Sweet! George St. Pierre's protege, the welterweight contender, is one of the most well-rounded fighters in the promotion, an introvert and a bit of a weirdo, but one hell of a martial artist. Thank you! Oh my gosh. Every time I take these quizzes, they always say, look, you're Conor McGregor. And I'm like, I'm Irish now? What the heck? And so, thank you for listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps up. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.